If you have a lawnmower that you've checked and it's got spark and it's got compression, and the next thing is fuel. So that has to do with carburetor and mixing the fuel and air. So here's a carburetor off a very common engine. It's a Briggs and Stratton, and these are so common that you're going to run into them a lot if you work on a lot of lawnmowers. So just wanted to show how you can go and dive a little bit deeper into these carburetors. There's not a whole lot to them, and I'll show you right now. Now once you get the carburetor off the mower, it's usually you got to take the air filter assembly off, and it's a couple, I think, like little 5/16 screws, sometimes 4 of them holding that plate on. You take the whole plate off, then there's a couple 10mm bolts here you can get on there and take those off. Be a little careful with the linkage, make note of how it goes back on there. It usually kind of goes only on one way. Getting the linkage out through this hole here can be a little tricky. Make sure not to break anything or bend your linkage when you do that. When you're taking it out, it has to come down, and you got to kind of cock the carburetor a little bit to get around the curve in the linkage, and it comes off pretty easy. And then what you want to do is go ahead and take your float bowl off, and here is the float bowl plug slash bolt, whatever goes in the bottom. Okay, that's a 1/2" size socket that you can get onto there, and take that out. And once you get that off, then what you're going to find is your float and needle. I've already taken this apart a little bit, so that's what that looks like. It's going to be sitting in there like this, okay? And then the needle hangs on the bottom of this float right here. I've got it upside down right now, so see how this groove is in the needle? It slides into that little slot right there on the float, okay? And then goes back down there into the see that little red O-ring down there? That's like the inlet tube that comes from the carburetor fuel tank, the lawnmower fuel tank. Okay, and it goes in there, and then there's this pin. Okay, these usually slide in and out pretty easy. You can get a pair of little needle nose pliers or some diagonal cutters to grab the edge of that pin if it's not coming out freely, or just go ahead and use some good lubricant. I had some laying around that I'd recommend that I've used recently that's really good. I'm not seeing it right now. Yeah, I've been using this stuff lately, and it seems to work really nicely at breaking things loose. So anyway, once you get that float and needle out of there and the pin, okay, I just usually lay a towel down to make sure it catches all the little parts, and I will then go and check and see if that hole in this plug, if I can see some light through it. You might not be able to see that, so I'm going to turn it sideways. So there's a little hole in the bottom that's got to be open, and many times if this mower's been sitting for a while, you're going to get debris and stuff in there. I don't know if you can see that, but I can see right through that. Let me see if I can hold it up to the light here. We can see that. Okay, that's nice and clear, so that's good. You want to make sure that that is clean. And then you're going to go ahead and get yourself some carburetor spray, or brake cleaner works really good too. Squirt down in all these holes and get them cleaned out. This right here is your emulsion tube, okay? And that can actually come out, that brass looking thing. Okay, so we're gonna spray this out and spray that out. Anywhere there's a little hole, there's another one like right down in there at the tip of my very small one that my finger's pointing to. There's another one right down in there. And then go ahead and spray through your inlet tube. And what I like to do is, see, there's a little butterfly valve here. Some have 2 butterfly valves, like one for the choke. This one's not installed. And then here's like the main throttle butterfly valve. And what you want to do is go ahead and take this little screw off that holds the plate on here for the valve. I noticed the orientation of like the numbers, if it has any. If yours has any on there, my number is on the right side. And I also pay attention to the orientation of how this goes back in. It probably only go back in one way. And so it was like this when this plate, when it's lined up with the plate. So actually this is the only way it can go. And yeah, see the hole lining up, and so it's in this orientation. So once you get that screw out, you can use a nice little skinny flathead screwdriver to remove that, and then you just pop it out. Comes right out. Remove this. Okay, put it to the side, and now see that emulsion tube down in there? On the inside of that, there's like a cavity that surrounds that emulsion tube where fuel gets into these tiny orifices. So those orifices really need to be cleaned out, and you can take a little wire and run it through each one of those little orifices. And so what I try to do is I'll go ahead and grab me a screwdriver. I have these flathead screwdrivers, a little bit bigger, and I like it because it's got the flats on the sides, and this can fit right down in through there. And then I put one of the flats right on top of that emulsion tube, nice and flat. Make sure it's flat so you don't damage it. And then what I'll do is stand it up like this, making sure that the flat of that screwdriver is resting nice right on top of that emulsion tube. Now I'm going to go ahead and hold on to this end of the screwdriver, making sure that that flat of the screwdriver is right on top of that emulsion tube. And I'm going to take a little, got this kind of heavy half-inch extension. I'm going to bang on this, but I got to use two hands to do that. And hopefully that emulsion tube is going to pop right out of the bottom of the carburetor. And I'm going to give it a couple whacks and see what happens. But I sprayed a little bit of that lube juice down in there, and it's been sitting for a few minutes. So let's go ahead and see if I can get that out. I'll be right back. Okay, that came out very nicely, and it popped right out. So here we go. Here's the emulsion tube, and as you can see, okay, we got one little hole at the bottom there. Some of these have multiple holes, like, believe it or not, some of them can have like 14 holes in them. And I don't know if you can see, there's one just to the right of my thumb right there. And then if you go straight up from that, there's another one that's even smaller. I don't even know if I can zoom in to pick up that detail, but let me get a little closer. There you go. So we need to make sure that those are clear. And let me get in here and turn it around. So those go all the way through. They should go all the way through. Wherever there's a hole, you need to go ahead and clear those out and make sure they go all the way through. What I like to use to do this, I've got just some wire laying around, and this is like really thin gauge stuff. I'll just take a piece of this and fish it through all the little holes. Or another thin gauge wire is if you got a wire brush laying around, just hack a little individual wire off of there with a pair of diagonal cutters, take it off and run it through any holes that you find on this emulsion tube. Okay, I got that all cleared out, and then what I like to do is put my finger up against this end of the tube and then spray some carburetor cleaner down in that one while I'm keeping my finger here, and then it will force carb cleaner or brake cleaner or whatever out of those little holes. Okay, and actually there are only 2 holes on this one. So I think what the problem was with this lawnmower, that I was I was able to get it started by spraying a little starter fluid in there, and it would run until it burned off that starter fluid that I squirted in. So it was meaning there was some kind of fuel delivery problem from the carburetor. And when I went to go take it off, everything was pretty loose where this mounts onto the engine itself. And so that was probably causing a big air leak, and I'll bet that that was it. So I'm going to go ahead and get this all back together and slap it on the lawnmower and see if it works.